President Berger from Portland. And Jeffery Steinborn, who's here all the way from Seattle today. And almost late.
It was a long trip this morning, too.
And almost late, exactly. I'd also like to welcome Omar Figueroa. Am I pronouncing that right, Omar? Fantastic. Omar is here. He's a San Francisco lawyer, and God knows the Bay Area has been leading the way in terms of medical cannabis access, and certainly we can't. We stand on the shoulders of giants when you see what's going on in the Bay Area. I'd like to welcome my good friend Douglas Hiatt, a lawyer from Seattle. Thanks very much, sir. And all the way from the heartland of cannabis cultivation in the U.S., I'd like to welcome the lovely Edie Lerman from Mendocino County. I was in Mendocino, it's the county Mendocino. Tell us for a couple of minutes what you've been working on and what's happening here in Portland these days.
Let's see. The rights we've been working on in court, mostly in Oregon, have to do with patient rights. A big one is the right to travel. There's an oral argument in the Court of Appeals next month on a case involving a patient from California who was transporting his friend to Fort Lewis here in Washington to go to Iraq, and was stopped and had medicine and had his recommendation that was disregarded, and he was arrested and prosecuted. And we have on appeal both whether the California recommendation should be given full faith and credit, which is not likely to be a winner issue, but the second issue has to do with the right to travel. There are no medical dispensaries in California. There are no medical cannabis stores, and people who are patients ought to be able to travel through Oregon or Washington or any other medical cannabis state and be accepted from arrest and prosecution and forfeiture by virtue of their being a patient in the state where they live. It just makes sense. Another issue we're working on has to do with patients being able to possess concealed handgun licenses. Sheriffs in 2 counties in Oregon revoke licenses. We sought a review in the courts and won, and the counties appealed, and those cases are also going to be argued next month. We've been litigating issues around return of medical cannabis, which is a constant struggle in Oregon when it's seized unlawfully. And mostly what we've been doing is trying to keep people out of jail. One thing I hope you think about when you're here today is the people that can't be here today because they're in custody. The thing about being a criminal lawyer is that when you represent patients, you're not representing any criminals, because it's prohibition that's the crime. And that's what binds us, I know, on this panel, is that we share that knowledge. I guess the only other thing I wanted to tell you about briefly is that, unfortunately, unlike in California, there is no safe access for patients to medical cannabis, and so we are collecting signatures for an initiative for the 2010 ballot that would create licensed and regulated dispensaries for patients. There's a group called Emcee, which is a Salem, Oregon group. They're over in the Rose Garden, which is about halfway back. And if you're an Oregon resident, then and registered to vote in Oregon, then you can sign a petition there. If you are eligible to vote, and almost everybody is in Oregon, including felons, except when they're actually physically in custody, and you haven't registered to vote, then you're not doing jack shit to change the law. So, but really, if you're not registered to vote, there's lots of opportunities here, whatever state you're in. Just walk around, and it's just such a tremendous opportunity to learn so much and get so much information. And thanks so much for being us, and thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot. We'll get back to Lee in a minute. Jeffrey, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on these days?
Well, I'm on Normal's board of directors, and that really has been my interest for a long time, which is the legalization of marijuana. Now, Douglas and I share office space, and so we're kind of ground zero for medical marijuana here in Seattle, and I certainly believe in that cause. And Douglas is doing more work there than I am. I remind you all that of the 800,000 people that are busted every year for marijuana, only a few of them are patients. The patients may be the most compelling, but the other 800,000 have their lives fucked up too. And by the way, as a defense attorney, what Lee didn't mention is we're required to use the word fuck once in every paragraph when we speak publicly, or they cut us off. So, speaking of voting, I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you there's a chance right now to make your vote really count, because there's a fellow running for city council in Seattle named Rusty Williams. Absentee ballots are due on Monday. And if 1 in 10 of the people who come to Hempfest vote for this guy, he'll get elected. And he's come out and said, I don't smoke it, but I think it ought to be legal. Now, that takes a lot of guts for a politician, even in Seattle. So if you haven't submitted your absentee ballots yet, go check off Rusty Williams for city council if you're in that election, and go ahead and vote on Monday. And you can say you did something for the cause, but you're not done, because remember, liberty's always unfinished business. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Rusty Williams, particularly with the absentee ballots, get in there and vote early and vote often, as they like to say. Omar, what can you tell us about what's going on in the Bay Area right now? I know certainly Los Angeles is under a lot of pressure these days. How are things in San Francisco and Oakland?
Cannabis prohibition still continues, and I'm still fighting it. There's been a record number of indoor marijuana grow busts in San Francisco. Most of these are medical cannabis cultivation sites. And so there's an uptick in enforcement and prosecutions now that the San Francisco District Attorney Kamala Harris wants to run for Attorney General of California. She wants to improve her stats before the election. So I'm fighting cannabis prohibition. I'm also working on an initiative to repeal cannabis prohibition in California. So far there have been 3 such initiatives submitted. And I'm also working with Debbie Goldsberry of the Cannabis Action Network and other activists on medical taxation, so that cities and counties will start, at the behest of the dispensaries and the patient, will start taxing and providing revenue for local government.
Something that should have been done a long time ago. They could really provide a lot of funding for drug treatment programs, as well as for poverty and harm reduction programs. And so I think that's great work, Omar. What's going on at your end? Always fighting the good fight here in Seattle.
Yeah, I guess we're doing the best we can to try and protect patients. Jeff and I do a great number of medical marijuana cases, and we're a little spread out right now because, unfortunately, law enforcement still refuses to accept the validity of the law. So we're in places like Colville and Vancouver, Mason County, and soon to be Grant County, I think. Where they just can't seem to leave a guy alone who's growing for his mom over there. They just arrested him the 2nd time with 4 plants. So we're a long way from any type of acceptance, but we're fighting, and I think we're moving in the right direction at least. But we certainly need to educate law enforcement, and we got a long way to go. And on that tax issue, I'm all for, taxing recreational use, but I'm definitely not for taxing medicine. I think we got enough problems with the health system in this country without screwing up and taxing marijuana for patients as well. It's already expensive enough. So I'm all for full legalization too, by the way, because I think at this point that we need to make a final push to legalize marijuana for everyone so that we can ensure that patients get it and get it safely, and that it's an easily obtainable thing for patients. And I think the only way to ensure that now is to push for legalization for everyone.
Thank you very much, Douglas. I think well said and well spoken. And I'd love to hear from you, Edie, and hear what's going on right now in the growing areas of California. And so what's happening in Mendocino County, and how's the fight down there?
The fight is going very well, although the local law enforcement definitely doesn't want patients to understand or know their rights. And so I find a lot of my time is spent just teaching patients how to legitimize their operations into compliance with the law. Unfortunately, there's a new ordinance that only allows for 25 plants per parcel in Mendocino County. So we're working on overturning that, as well as working with parents who have had problems with CPS issues and trouble with law enforcement recognizing their rights to be a patient as well as be a parent. And so I work closely with kids and parents and try and teach them how to appropriately kind of meld those two together. And I consider myself a constitutional rights attorney, and I think that this issue very much is a human rights issue. So I was really excited to come here and be on the panel.
I think that's terrific.